I did not feel like my authentic self in those corporate interviews because I was just going by the script. I was saying what I was supposed to say in those interviews. Meanwhile, I'd go into a conversation with an inspiring person on my podcast and I would just light up and come out of that interview feeling inspired about the world and about the future.
Hi, I'm Christina Barcy. Welcome to the Boss Goddess podcast. This is your invitation to step out of the hustle and into your purpose and passion. What's my secret? Podcasting. This is how I've up-leveled my life on multiple occasions when I was ready to bring my dreams to life. And it's how I help my clients realize their big dreams. This is where you become the boss goddess in your niche and gently bring your dreams to life. Did you know podcasting is a clarity companion? By just going through the process of creating your podcast, you will become more clear on your path forward. And what follows clarity? Confidence. If you're ready to take a step forward that follows your authenticity, meets you exactly where you are now in this moment, and will guide you forward in a creative and organic way, then I encourage you to explore what a podcast created by you could look like. You can get started with my free Activate Your Goddess Era with Podcasting guidebook, where you'll receive 5 days of gentle guidance and a resource to your inbox that will get you started in exploring this option as your next step to clarity, confidence, and maybe even the very foundation that will become your next brand or business. Just go to boss-goddess.co/activate or click the link in the show notes. Have you ever found yourself having to rediscover your path unexpectedly? Maybe your industry is seeing a lot of changes. Maybe the path you picked isn't panning out the way you had hoped and you feel a little sideswiped by that. Maybe it's a layoff. I've been there a few different times. And in fact, if you've been following along with this podcast this year, I've been talking a lot about my current experience with this. So when this happens, a lot is changing, and it brings up the personal question of, without this, then what? And with that comes up lots of fears and emotions, but also possibility and space and maybe even newly found motivation. My guests today, there are two of them, had an experience like this where they both were working in corporate together and their positions were being eliminated. But then something powerful happened. They found community and support in one another. They helped each other navigate the confusion and the emotions and everything else, including the new identities that come with an abrupt change. So today we have Rebecca Dhrimaj and Adine Stone joining us, who are the co-founders of the Empathy Collective, a change readiness consulting firm. And they share with us the really inspiring story of how Rebecca used this time to create a podcast that focused on empathy and how by using it in the workplace, maybe moments like this don't have to be so painful. The conversations on their podcast then evolved from there to form their new consulting firm. What I love about their story is that it's rooted in the power of human connection. And I love how Rebecca recognized that this can be amplified by creating my favorite thing, a podcast, and then how that podcast continued to sort of meet them where they are because it evolved into this idea, into an actual business inspired by the theme and concept that they discuss on the podcast with all kinds of people, including myself, actually. I recently guested on an episode with them on the E3 Engage and Empower with Empathy podcast. I'll be sure to link to my episode in the show notes. So before we jump into today's conversation, here's a little more about Rebecca and Adine. They are united by a shared mission to help leaders navigate the human side of change with care and purpose. Rebecca, Chief Empathy Officer, draws on her experience leading organizational change to equip leaders with tools to coach through fear, resistance, and growth, while Adine, founding partner, brings decades of expertise in HR, sales, communications, and mentoring to empower individuals at every stage of their professional journey. Together, they combine empathy-driven leadership with action-oriented results, inspiring teams to turn change into opportunity. Here is my conversation with Rebecca and Adine. So welcome, Rebecca and Adine.
Thank you.
It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Very excited.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you both here. It's rare that we get to have more than one guest on the show, but it's always for good reason. And this is one of those special times. So thank you both for being here today to talk about your journey.
Happy to be here. I think we come as a package deal. So I'm glad you bought the package.
Yeah. That's always something really special. So actually, let's start there. I'd love to hear about how the two of you originally connected, how you met, and what you were doing at that time, just to kick us off so we understand where you all started.
I love this one. So in my last corporate job, I accidentally encountered Adine. So I was put on a project to work together with Adine. She was basically a stakeholder, and I was supporting her team. And I still remember to this day, the first time I met her in a meeting room, it was one of those really tiny meeting rooms inside an office. She walked into the room and she just lit up the room immediately. And I knew then and there that I was going to love this collaboration. And I wish I could just tap myself on the shoulder during that meeting, because I was so nervous because I was presenting a marketing plan to her and her boss. And I really wanted to impress, and I wanted to show that I would be a good stakeholder for them and support their team, since I was new to the project. And Adine just immediately brought my anxiety levels down significantly just by her sheer presence. And I think that was a sign of what was to come for us, because we eventually were on the same team together. I was brought into her team. She became my manager. And we developed this really strong relationship that was much more than just the manager-employee relationship. We were like collaborators. Mm-hmm. We would co-host workshops together with leadership teams. We would present in the Women in Leadership meetings together. So we did so much more because we just immediately clicked, and we realized that we had something. We just didn't know what that was, right? A certain je ne sais quoi. It's hard to describe.
Yeah, that sounds really energetic. Like you just knew right away, like the feeling, which there aren't really great ways to explain that other than it just being a feeling. So I relate to that. Adine, was that moment as relevant to you?
That moment, yes, and again, I always say the thing about Rebecca that struck me was just her smile, and you can see it, her eyes crinkle up, and she just got this most gorgeous smile. But what really, for me, it was that connection of this someone that I just felt the authenticity that came from Rebecca. I could see she was nervous, but she just, what she was bringing to the party, and actually the conversation that she had, I always appreciated and felt the depth of research that Rebecca does and the depth of understanding the topic before she comes to you. And I think that during our relationship, the wonderful pivoting between Rebecca being the depth of knowledge and doing great research and bringing that real expertise to the topic. And I would say I'm kind of the activator and getting stuff going. Rebecca can delve deep and I can go high. So that partnership that we had during our time together on the team was so, so valuable for me. And for me as a leader of a team, one of the things that Rebecca really always brought to the team for me that I appreciated was this ability to really take a topic and understand it deeply, and then her networking ability, so really helping our team network in a global environment. And we were a team that needed to be global. Rebecca's not scared of anybody. She will knock on the door of the CEO in a heartbeat. And that was wonderful for me. It was always great to see that. But we just, when we were working in this particular team, it was a very small team, and almost in a weird way, our own little startup team. We were very small, but we had to span the globe. And yeah, so it was just this gel. It was way more, she was my colleague and friend very early on within this context of the team that we had. So we were well gelled there.
That's such a special experience when that happens in those categories where it's more than just friendship, but it's also you're able to complement collaboratively, which is, I think, harder to find often. That lovely collaboration where you offer, different assets in the categories that complement each other to execute on together. And that's really just like a cherry on top that makes everything go.
So true. Mm-hmm. So true.
It's really cool. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it was that you were actually doing? Because we know you have a podcast that focuses around empathy, and I'd love to hear how that concept sort of started in the corporate setting that allowed you to kind of grow into what you're doing now, essentially. But can you tell us about that seedling a little bit?
So I'll give a high level overview of the business we're in. So we're in a large life sciences company, but where we had a little niche was we had these customer facing laboratories that we were able to really take out of the sort of general run of business, but they were like little marketing hubs. And we had sites across the globe in Asia, in Europe, here in the US, and in Brazil. And we were taking these and marketing them to the outside world. And our scientists were able to come into these labs and use them like a playground with our customers. And so we had such a unique setting for this. And it was during this time, I think, that I really, as I was working with a team, that I realized that we had, apart from the team, we had so many incredible stakeholders out in the global setting. And that if we weren't sitting down and really listening to what it was that they needed, and one of our big stakeholders was sales, and we all know that sales needs to move at a certain pace. They have things that they need to do. Listening to what they need and how we could adapt to really help them take it forward, we were going to lose. And so that empathetic understanding, listening grew already, I think, at this particular stage. Do you agree with that, Rebecca?
I agree. And just the nuances from a cultural perspective that we experienced, so these labs were cookie cutters so that the customer, whether they're walking into the lab in Sao Paulo or the one in Tokyo, they get the same customer experience. But what's not cookie cutter is the culture behind the lab. So the people in Sao Paulo, we would have to work with in a very different way than the people in Tokyo or Seoul or Singapore or even France. So we had to adapt to those local conditions so that we as a global team could ladder that up into a very consistent strategy and message to the external market. So yeah, I agree. I think the empathy piece started all the way, back into that unique role that we had as a team.
And I would say, Barcy, the other thing for me just quickly is that with my team, we were a small team of 6-7 people. It was fundamental for me that my team understood where we were and understood how valued they were in each of their roles. So I spent a lot of my time, and this is the great part, I had people who really knew their jobs and they were excellent at their jobs so they could get on with it. And I spent my time making sure that I had the team, I could gel with them, I could help them understand where we were when we got messages from above, that I could help them understand where the changes were going to take place and how we as a little team could adapt and move and go. So deploying that sort of real deep understanding of my team and that empathy with my team as well, I think was a very strong anchor for all of us in that tiny little team in the big corporate.
Yeah, I'm hearing it throughout execution, but also through the leadership and how you just approached everything through this lens of the human beings as they are, in the real sense of, that you're dealing with human beings, not just, the goal at hand that everyone needs to execute on or their expertise, which I think often happens where we just see people for what they're doing rather than who they are and what they bring to human beings. And that's what I'm hearing. That's my interpretation of what you're sharing.
100% right. Yep, 100% right.
It makes so much more sense now with that detail of adding in this approach to how do we apply this in different cultures. And it's such a fascinating conversation that I love having with different industries about anyone who has a global market and has to figure out how to make the same thing work in these different spaces. And there's so many moving parts to that because there's the consumer that the sales is out facing to, whether that's B2B or, B2C, but either way, there's someone on the other end of that. And their behavior in each culture is going to be a little bit different in how they are receiving. And then the execution of the team in those markets. And then, your base, which, United States or, so it just goes on. And it's so like,
right.
It almost has to be a human approach or you're completely missing it. And I think that happens a lot. It's hard for that reason, but maybe it doesn't have to be. Maybe it's as simple as just listening.
Oh, yes.
I have so many friends in sales and marketing because they're the best listeners. Because that's their job. They need to hear what you need so they can then solve your problem. That's the beauty of treating someone like a human being rather than the object of the goal or whatever it may be. So I just want to point that out because if someone's not thought about this before, it's a quite layered approach. And I think women are so good at this, like put women in all these leadership positions because they just excel at bringing those nuances together. And it sounds like that's what you two are doing really well.
We try.
So what happened? I know you're not working there any longer. So tell me a little bit more about how things progressed from what you were doing. You were obviously doing a great job, with your team and the job at hand. And now we have a different business. So tell me a little bit about how that kind of started.
Rebecca, I'll start the story and you can take it from there. Well, we were doing a great job until we weren't, right? But no, this is, I think, what is sometimes hard about these scenarios is we were in a great position doing really well, and then came the usual, cascade, got to cut down, and human beings become numbers. We just got the phone call one Thursday morning, and it was ironic because the day before I got a meeting on my calendar. And then I had all of my team pinging me, hey, I've got this really strange meeting on my calendar, strange meeting. And we're going, okay. And so we all climbed on a call actually the day before. And Rebecca was the one that said to me, Adine, this smells of layoffs, right? I'm going, no, Rebecca, I spoke to my boss a week ago. She assured me our team was great. Anyway, long story short, It didn't just smell like layoff, it was. Of course, for everybody, right? These are hard times. But for me, what was incredibly beautiful about it, as tough as it was for every single one of us, as a little team, we remained connected, right? Even after we got those phone calls that Thursday afternoon, we were all talking. I was trying to give them all support through what we were going through. And for the next probably month, 6 weeks even, we jumped on a call daily still, just chatting and going, how are you all doing? Where's everybody's space? Where are we going? Until we naturally just all moved on into our different parts. But it was hard. In my case, I'd been with the company for 28 years, and it was just like, whoa, okay, where am I? Who am I? What am I? And, as I mentioned to you before, it was like all of a sudden I realized that the community that had anchored me for so very long was just gone. And I had to, do my own little piece of reevaluating, remeasuring, just going, who am I? It took a little bit of time, but it's all good stuff.
Yeah, those transitions are multi-layered. We talked a little bit about this before we hit record, those transitional moments where the things we do become such a part of us, especially when we care deeply about the people and our work. And it does become a moment to ask ourselves, who am I without this?
Right. Totally.
Yeah. Rebecca, what was that like for you?
It's interesting because leading up to that pivotal moment that Adine mentioned where we all got the meeting invites, I was in a completely different scenario. And because Adine is the person she is, and she's always looking for opportunities to develop her team and find growth opportunities for her team, she encouraged me to apply for a program that the executive team was offering to bring temporarily 2 people onto the executive team for a year to run a project. So I applied for the program and interviewed for it, got accepted. The executives asked me, if we were to give you a project, what should it be? And I said, without hesitation, employee engagement. And I had zero background in it. My background was in strategy, marketing, communications. Wow. But I could sense that employee morale was taking a hit. And I could just feel it. You just feel it. It's not necessarily a tangible thing that you can touch, but you can feel it in the air. And so I wanted to do something about it. So they partnered me up with the head of HR, human resources, and we started working on a project. And about 3 months into the project, the business division decided to reorg, so completely restructure. A new chief of staff was brought on to the executive team. She found out about my project and she was like, hey, Rebecca, love the project, think it's important, but I need you to lead change management for this restructuring. So wow. I had to quickly bring myself up to speed because I had no background in change management. And she wanted me to put together a plan and a strategy in 4 weeks. This was post restructuring, right? So the go live already happened. So I had to backtrack on a lot of things. But what I discovered really quickly as I was consuming as much as I could on change management was how impactful it could be if it was done correctly and in a good way. Unfortunately, I did not see it done that way, but I saw where there were gaps. And where was the gap? The human side of change. So the leaders had a really sound strategy. They had a great process in place. They had all the milestones laid out and the timelines and a training program. The technical side of change was sound. But dealing with human emotions, the fear, the resistance, the anxiety, all the stuff that bubbles up and causes change resistance, no one knew how to address that. And as the change management lead, I wanted desperately to give the people leaders a toolkit to help them coach their people through change, but it didn't exist. So instead, everyone was flailing. There was very little communication, which created a worse scenario because people were creating rumors and gossiping. And basically, the organization was at a standstill for about 6 to 8 months, like very limited productivity, because everyone moved into self-preservation mode.
Yeah.
They were defending their own territory and protecting themselves rather than collaborating and moving the change forward. So, yeah, ironically, 2 days after I wrapped up the change project and had a huge celebration ceremony with all the change agents. So I had a network of change agents I was leading around the world. Uh-huh. I celebrated their efforts during the change. That's when we got those meeting invites. Because I was supposed to basically wrap up that project and go back to my day job on Adine's team. So, of course, in the call with HR, I'm like, guys, I just helped the executive team with change. Of course, after they read the script and laid me off, I was like, well, do you have anything to offer? What's going on? And honestly, I was already done. After they read the script, I was done, but I just wanted to see what they would say. And so they said, yeah, we have a couple of other roles that you can interview for outside the business division. But once again, I'd have to interview for them. There was no guarantee. And they basically gave me 2 weeks to land a job. Otherwise, my systems would be shut down. Now, that's a luxury because here in the U.S., your systems are shut down immediately.
30 minutes.
You're laid off.
30 minutes.
30 minutes.
You don't get to say goodbye to your colleagues or anything. You literally just get shut down.
It's like getting arrested.
Can I just say something to someone, please? No, you're done.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And I'm literally pinging people on, so we use Microsoft Teams. I was literally pinging people during the layoff call. Hey, I'm getting laid off right now. In case I get shut down, just a heads up. Because, we had meetings the next day with people who didn't know we were being laid off. And then they showed up to the meeting. They were like, where's Adine and Rebecca?
And they look for you and go, this person is no longer in the system. That's what happens. That's your notification, right? Yeah, it was tough. That was really tough.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was basically my journey leading up to that day. But what led me to launch the podcast so soon after being laid off wasn't because we got laid off, but because I spent an entire year seeing how when empathy is literally the oxygen for empathy is sucked out of the room entirely and leaders are asked to lead people through change, it creates a very toxic environment. There's a way that you can do layoffs and headcount reduction and still do it with dignity and respect for people. And that's not what was happening. And this is very typical in corporate America too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't think it was, just our organization. I think everyone, for the most part, behaves that way with layoffs. and just trying to get people on board with a major change. It's impossible because empathy was not being used. So I thought, now that I'm laid off, I don't have a job, I have time. Mm-hmm. I could either write a LinkedIn article about this topic, or I could just launch a podcast and elevate the voices of people who are using empathy in the workplace in a meaningful way. I don't care what your workplace is. You could be a hairdresser, you could be a machine operator in a manufacturing plant, or you could be a corporate executive. I don't care. I wanted to get all angles of empathy in the workplace and elevate those voices to show the world that there are people out here who do this well, and it impacts the bottom line in a positive way. So there is a performance and a financial outcome to empathetic leadership. So that was the idea. I had no plan to go into consulting or anything. I just thought I need to get the message out there on empathy while I'm interviewing for corporate roles.
Oh, wow. I mean, I love the fire in your voice when you start talking about that moment when you were like, you tell me, but probably a little angry, probably a little like inspired from that too. Like there's an interesting finite line sometimes between that, but it can be very motivating. Adine, you look like you want to share.
Yeah, we had very interesting conversations in this time, and they did. They varied from being incredibly sad and hurt, being confused, to being angry, like the typical change curve, right? Yeah. So going through that change curve of all of these different emotions all the time, having someone like Rebecca where we could really just sit and reflect and go through, recognize those emotions. I think that was one of the big things for me, is like being okay with I'm angry, being okay with I'm really sad today, and seeing how going through, I remember one day I phoned Rebecca and I just need to talk, and I literally burst out crying, and I sat and cried for like 5 minutes, and then it was, all right, I'm feeling much better about this. What is it that's really upsetting me? And we were able to unpack it. And the same, I think, not speaking on Rebecca's behalf, but I think the same for Rebecca. And to loop it back to the podcast, I think what was so incredible for me with the podcast and the chats that Rebecca was having was the different people that she was connecting with, and the amazing rich conversations that she was having with these people. I remember particularly her hairdresser that she interviewed and spoke to. I'm going, how did we get empathy in a hairdresser? And just listening to that conversation was a mind blow for me. And I think all of that really helped me move into that next step of going, all right, here's some great opportunities for us to start thinking about.
Wow. That's once again, so special that you had that with each other. And if you don't mind, I'd love to ask a personal question, because sometimes that level of emotional roller coaster can be really new. Was that something that was a new experience for you, or was that, I'm like here or there with my emotional life. Sometimes I'm good with it, and sometimes I'd rather not deal with it and pretend it's nothing.
I was used to being the strong, I'm okay, I can handle anything, I've got it, I've got my team, got my kids lined up, got my husband lined up, I'm good with all of this. So all of a sudden really, and that was, I think, for me, recognizing that I've lost something really big. And it's okay to acknowledge that. It's okay to feel the sadness. It's okay to feel like I feel like a failure, and then to recognize, but I'm not a failure. So it was new for me to go through all of those experiences. So it was different.
Thank you for sharing that honestly. And I think that is often the case for us that are really high performing. And then the thing that we're good at performing is taken away, and it's, well, now what am I supposed to do with my time? What am I supposed to do with all of the things? And for me, I relate to that.
Maybe I want to add one quick little thing into that. The thing that was really interesting for me is how my husband struggled with it. And I had always been in a certain role in our relationship, a working mom, working career woman, and all of a sudden I wasn't. And it was like, I could see that he didn't know how to talk about me to colleagues. Like, my wife does what? Like, she's just at home now? It was really strange. So it was a lot of that kind of dynamic as well. Until I actually said to him one day, I said, you got to just let me be. You got to let go of all of this and just leave me for now. And it did. It took me a good 6 months to come together. But to his grace, he did. He stepped back and went, all right, I just got to let her get. But it was, so even as deep as that, you don't realize how all these relationships that you have in your life are connected to that part of your life.
100%. Thanks for pointing that out because it's so true. And I don't think it's talked about that much about how our identities are intertwined with what someone else's identity might be as well. Like, how's that challenge their role and their role with you and in the family or in the network, whatever that may be. And it's totally a part of it. It's completely connected. And 6 months, I think, is actually really fast. So good job.
Thank you.
Not that you need to do it fast or anything, but just, yeah, it's, I'm going through a bit of a transition and it's taking way longer than that. So everything runs its course as needed and it's different for everyone.
So true. So true.
Yeah. What about you, Rebecca?
For me, the emotional battle was less with my partner, because I have a husband at home too, but more with my ego. So I was in battle with my ego for quite a bit. And especially when I got to a point where my severance ran out, because in the US, you get a severance based on your tenure and how long you've been with the company. So you have financial stability, quote unquote, for at least a few months after you get laid off. But, you know, I was so used to being head to head with my husband as far as who's supporting the family. And we have 2 small children, and we literally had the exact same salary,
Wow.
my husband and I. So when I was laid off, our household income was split in half. So once the severance disappeared, and of course I was thinking, I have all this runway with the severance, I'll interview my butt off and land a job before the severance runs out. That didn't happen. In fact, I remember having an interview with a consulting firm and I really wanted the job. And it was literally right before my severance was about to run out. I was like, oh, great. I'm at the final stages of this interview. If I get it, it's just in time. I'll be able to pay for my kids' tuition, their school tuition. And then I got the rejection. And I remember going for a run because I'm a runner. I went for a run later that day and I crossed over the bridge. There's a bridge over a lake and there's like a little dam. And I just happened to look over the bridge and on the dam, someone had used stones to spell I love you with rocks. Mm-hmm. And I just looked at it. I stopped in my tracks and I had my phone with me because I was listening to music on my run, took my phone out, took a picture of it and just burst into tears because I felt like that was the universe telling me it's okay. You don't know what the future is going to hold for you, but it's going to be okay. And it was in the end, but I'm telling you, in the moment, it sucked because I had to borrow money for my family to pay for my kids' school tuition. I was no longer bringing in income, and I didn't get the job that I thought I was going to get. So it was a real shot to my ego. And so that was the internal battle. My husband was completely supportive. I think his biggest struggle is just making sure we're financially sound as a family. Yeah. But for me, it was the internal battle. How do I overcome this image I have of myself being the strong woman in the family, the one bringing in a decent paycheck? You know, I was never the stay-at-home mom. And so I had to try to cut through to that internal negative dialogue, which was happening quite a bit, a little over a year ago.
How did you start to untangle that?
I think the pivotal moment for me was when I was interviewing for a role. So this was a few months later after I had had that moment of tears. I flew out to San Francisco and I was sitting in a hotel room preparing for an interview, an in-person interview the next day with a company out there. And I started to panic, not because I was worried about not getting the job. I was panicking about getting the job. Will I have to give up my workplace empathy podcast? Am I really going to make an impact on people's lives if I take this role?
Wow.
I mean, I was asking myself all of these questions and trying to find passion and enthusiasm in myself to do this, to come into the interview with some sort of inspiration, and I couldn't find it. And I'm pretty sure that's why I wasn't selected for the role, because it was between me and one other candidate. So yeah, that was a pivotal moment for me. And eventually I just sat down. Adine was actually, she played a strong role in this. I sat down with her and with my father, who's also a consultant. And they were both like, Rebecca, have you thought about just stopping with this corporate interviewing and creating something on your own? And that's when the wheels started turning and I started thinking about, okay, what could this look like? And what will I do?
Thank you for sharing that. That's a really interesting moment when we're faced with who we've become while we're trying to be who we were. And having both experience, they often happen simultaneously like that. We're kind of a little bit of both still before the new thing fully emerges. And the livelihood gets really challenged. The way you described the money challenge with the financial aspect of how we understand how to make money. It's always been, this is how we do it. We work at this kind of job. This is my expertise. And this is how we do it. And then suddenly the passion emerges or something really evolutionary for us, right, in our lives, because it sounds very much like a personal evolution that goes beyond personal once we start activating. But those moments can be really, really challenging because we're kind of embodying both at the same time. And those can feel like conflict. So I love that you had people in your life to help you look at it from the possibility perspective. How did you know that it was time to trust that? Was it just because you kind of already were feeling it, like you were in that interview and feeling that change, but it can be a back and forth dance for a while often.
It is.
Yeah.
But I think I had gone through at that point 6 to 8 months of corporate interviews, all just leading nowhere. And meanwhile, I'm podcasting and I'm interviewing really inspiring people. I'm interviewing a former United Nations peacekeeper and then going into a corporate interview feeling like I'm about to fall asleep. Like something's got to give here. This is not my authentic path. I did not feel like my authentic self in those corporate interviews because I was just going by the script. I was saying what I was supposed to say in those interviews. Meanwhile, I'd go into a conversation with an inspiring person on my podcast and I would just light up and come out of that interview feeling inspired about the world and about the future. I think to me, it was like a sign from the universe. All these rejections were it was like the universe knocking on my door and saying, just listen, you have another path. You don't know what it looks like yet, but just start walking in that direction and see what happens. And that's where the conversation with Adine and with my father started to take root. I think Adine was kind of secretly behind the scenes waiting for me to figure out that I should go off on my own, like waiting in the wings. Because she was the obvious choice of business partner, hands down. So it was just a very fluid process. It just naturally happened.
Yeah. Thank you. It's interesting to hear you share about sort of this feeling of like being able to be in your authentic version and how good that feels. It's really hard to go the other way after you experience that. It feels like going backwards. And it's often like that feeling, like we have to kind of experience it oftentimes, like how easy that comes and how inspiring it is and how good it feels to have that authentic version of ourselves in our daily life, and then to take that away and try to do something that no longer feels like who we are and our magic. That's what I'm hearing. And I think I wanted to emphasize that because I think we often, when we're in these moments, we're like, but how? Like, how am I going to know? And it's really comes down to experiencing our authentic selves and remembering like, that's how good it gets to be. The how unfolds when we start taking steps. So tell me about the how. Tell me about what you're building together and the consulting that you are forming, which I think is inspired by the podcast, but it's really sounds like it's inspired by everything that you just shared. It's an evolution in the way I'm seeing it, but I'd love to hear you share about it.
Yeah, it was around this time last year, Adine, on one of our usual chats, because we talked so regularly. I said, what if I take what I've been learning in these podcast interviews, because it's an interview-based podcast. All of my episodes are interviews with business leaders across sectors. What if I pull out the key themes that I'm hearing in these interviews and use this as a foundation for a change readiness diagnostic, or what we call resilient IQ? So what we've seen in organizations is, leaders talk about empathy as a soft skill and this kind of wishy-washy, nice to have thing, but no one really measures it. In organizations, it's, a lot of the KPIs or key performance indicators are very much aligned around execution. So how well does a leader execute on the task that they've been given? And then they're measured on that. but no one's measured on resilience or empathetic leadership. And so we started talking about how do we bring this research that we've been doing. So what I didn't know I was launching a research tool when I launched the podcast, but then I realized, 30 interviews in, I was like, this is research.
Yeah.
There is some really great material here that we can use to build this diagnostic and help leaders really pinpoint their areas of strength and their growth opportunities to really create resilience in their teams and their organizations. So it actually started with that diagnostic, and we started to build that out. And then right around the holiday season last year, I basically formally asked Adine if she would be my business partner. I actually invited her onto a podcast episode that I launched on Christmas Day.
I may or may not have cried.
And she didn't know why she was going to be on the podcast. I said, look, I'm interviewing this guy named Mark Madison. He's written a book called Freedom from Fear. He's done a really good TED Talk. I want you to show up on this episode. And she was like, okay, sure. Do I need to prepare anything? And basically in his TED Talk, he had talked about how important it is to write letters of gratitude to people in your life. Like, don't wait until the funeral and then say, hey, this person was great. Joe, we used to go for drinks every Friday and we had good laughs. It's like, don't wait until someone dies. Like, write them a letter now. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to write a gratitude letter to Adine, read it to her at the end of the podcast episode, and then basically formally invite her to be my business partner. So that's what we did.
You did it on the podcast.
She did. It was so beautiful.
Okay.
Oh,
I have to link
gosh.
to that episode in your show notes because it's really beautiful and special. and totally put you on the spot, Adine.
Totally put me on the spot. It was very, very special. And as I say, I may or may not have cried. That just epitomizes the relationship that Rebecca and I have. And I think for us to be able to truly walk into something like a brand new business and start formulating and working on it with the grounding that we have of a shared experience, but also just this really true link and connection that we have as two human beings. And I think, ultimately at the end of the day, we all know this, that when you're moving into a new area, new business or whatever, having a business partner that you can truly rely on, truly trust, and just have good conversations. And Rebecca and I are very yin and yang, right? I mean, what Rebecca brings and I bring are two very, very different elements. But we really support each other and complement each other exceptionally well. So I do love that story. It's a great story.
I always like to say, I like the airplane analogy. I'm basically on the tarmac, like looking at the strategy, looking at the skyline, like I have the vision for the future, but I would still be chilling on the tarmac if it wasn't for Adine, because she helps me take off. She's like, okay, now it's
Can
time
we just
to
fly
take
this thing now and go?
It's like, let's get in the air now. So if I didn't have Adine, I would just be circling on the tarmac like, okay, guys, does anyone want some free drinks? Because I don't know when we're taking off anytime soon.
Wow, that is amazing. I love that story. And it just makes perfect sense from the way you described how your friendship was originally forged. Not just your friendship, but the foundation of friendship in a work situation is so special and foundational. And that complementary opposites yet intersection at the same time is really unique and valuable. So I'd love to hear what you're excited about that you're working on now. And then I have one more question after that.
For me, I'm just so excited about getting this message out into the workplace around empathy. And as Rebecca said, empathy is so perceived as a soft skill. And honestly, I think with our message coming in that where empathy is a strategy and building it into your workforce and building it into your people, just so excited to get people seeing that part of empathy. And then for me, and I always say this to Rebecca, the gem that we have in our Resilient IQ diagnostic tool of being able to measure it. So it gives senior leaders this thing that they need for some KPI that they can measure. And we've got that. So that really excites me to get these conversations out there in the workplace. And then, honestly, I'm just excited by every time we have conversations and we're literally in a week's time, we're meeting to do our annual strategy conversation. Just how this organically has so many opportunities to grow in so many different directions. It just really, really lights my fire. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, that is super exciting.
Yeah,
Rebecca, do you want to add anything?
I fully agree with Adine there. I think what excites me the most is the response we're getting so far, so early on in the launch of our business, and the responses we're getting from such diverse areas, industries, and business areas. Like tomorrow, I have a call with a school principal who wants to implement this concept in the leaders in K through 12
Wow.
schools. We're getting really good reception from the manufacturing industry as well, an industry that we have zero experience in, but there's such a need to retain workers and retain talent. There's interest coming from the most unexpected places, and that's what gives us hope and keeps us going. I feel like it's fuel for us. The more we have conversations like this with people who are completely out of our normal realm of expertise, I love that. Like it pushes us out of our comfort zone, and we learn about new industries, and all these people are super passionate about empathy and bringing it to their work.
That is so encouraging, I'm sure. And that's the beauty of not over planning the how, is that you get to see it makes more space to create something even bigger than an initial vision. And that's the special thing about allowing room for that. So I like to ask everyone this question. If there is one thing, and you can both answer if you'd like, if there's one thing that you'd like the listener to walk away from what we talked about today, what would that be?
From my side, I would say trust your intuition. I mean, the change journey that I can speak for myself, the change journey that I went through, I had to go through that journey in my own time, and everyone does. But pay attention. I'd like to call it have heightened sensitivity for your surroundings. Pay attention to the world around you, because the universe sends you signs. It does. If you're too distracted looking at your phone, doing whatever, you're not going to see those signs, and you're not going to wake up. I feel like I went through an awakening. You're not going to wake up. You're going to be in this slumber mode for a long time, just kind of going through the motions until something hits you, literally probably hits you, physically hits you like a smack in the face. I didn't wait until I got to that moment. I got to a point where I was starting to pick up on the signals. So I would encourage, for any of you out there who feel like you're not on your authentic path, but you don't know what that authentic path is, tune into the universe a little bit, because it might tell you something.
Love that answer. That's very of this podcast. Thank you for that, Rebecca.
Honestly, mine's in a similar vein. It's just, I think about just your dreams, right? And sometimes how we dream these dreams and we think about these great opportunities and things that we want to do, and just somehow we don't take that action. And in my case, waited for something to happen before I got kicked out of the nest, right? I wish there was someone that said to me earlier, just Adine, go for it. Just go for it. Give it a try. Maybe you can't do it 100%, but give something a try. Just trust your gut, trust your feeling, and go for it, because it's often hard, but sometimes it's actually a lot easier than you think it's going to be. And if you're not just going to give it a bash and give it a try, you're never going to know. And we sit now, and in my case, in that job for a very long time, and I could have probably made great changes earlier on. But again, when that opportunity comes, take it. And I'm so grateful for where I am today in this wonderful opportunity.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. Agreed. It's that first step. It's that first shift that is the hardest and the most important. The rest starts to unfold once we move. So yeah, that's perfect. I love that. How can we connect with you, and how can we find your podcast?
Well, you can connect with us at theempathycollective.com. That's probably the best place to find us. Adine and I are both on LinkedIn, if you're active on LinkedIn. The podcast is available on all the podcast channels, so Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music. Wherever you listen to podcasts, it's there. It's called E3, Engage and Empower with Empathy.
Love that. Thank you both so much for sharing your story in the most authentic way. Speaking of authenticity, you're both So authentic. And I think that's the magic in the room that the two of you found in each other and what you bring as you continue to create. It's very inspiring. And thank you for sharing it.
Thank you for creating a really warm and safe space for us to share this story with you, Parsi.
It was an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to the Boss Goddess podcast. And if you're ready to get started in exploring podcasting as an option for your next step to clarity, confidence, and maybe even the very foundation that will become your next brand or business, then go to boss-goddess.co/activate to get 5 days of gentle guidance and resources from me that will tap into your magic and your wisdom with my free Activate Your Goddess Era with Podcasting guidebook. Just go to boss-goddess.co/activate or click the link in the show notes.